So, giving a speech, you would think you just get up and give a speech. Oh, but there's so much more. Isn't it delightful? In fact, going back to chapter 12, and I'm doing this as a review here to be very specific about these 4 points. How many ways can you give a speech? Or at least figure out a way to present it. All right, now this will be on the test. Oh my goodness, so this is why I'm reviewing it at this point. This hopefully will be a fairly short little video. So, what are they? There's 4 of them. Count them. Yes, and you need to know them. Yes, once more, they're on the test. There's impromptu, manuscript, memorized. Don't panic. I told you you don't have to memorize anything, but it is one method of giving a speech. And then extemporaneous. So let me briefly explore each of these types. All right, impromptu speaking. Have any of you ever been to a comedy club or at least watched stand-up comics on some streaming network? Who knows, whatever. This is an example of, and I'm going to come back to them as well, to the stand-up comics, where sometimes these comics will improvise. Stuff just comes right off the top of their head. There was a program, I think it was on Netflix some years ago, where 3 or 4 comedians would come and they would be given some dialogue or situation, and they would have to improvise a comedy skit out of it. This is impromptu speaking, where you don't prepare anything, you don't have a chance to really even think about what you're going to say. You just get up and talk. And you're thinking, oh crap, I hope that never happens to me. Well, believe it or not, I think this happens more often than any other kind of speaking situation. You're in a meeting and the boss looks at you and says, Ray, tell us what you think about this situation. Okay, that's impromptu speaking. What do I have here on the slide? It's everyday speaking. Yeah, you don't make an outline before you go see some friends and talk about what's happening on the day, or do you? I don't know. Put those 3x5 cards away. Stop it. Okay, so yeah, it's just off the top of your head, speaking without preparation. And of course, advantages, flexibility, spontaneity, but also it can be disorganized. It can make you very nervous because there's no way to practice for it. So again, improvisation and improv comedy is a good example of something that it's improvised, it's impromptu, uh, but yet it still becomes a presentation. And I say down here one example of impromptu speaking that I consider very important is the job interview. And I'm sure many of you have already been on job interviews, and you sit there and the person introduces themselves, and then you introduce yourself, and then the person doing the interview looks at you and says, well, Ray, tell me about yourself. That's impromptu speaking. Although, in one of the other types of styles of presentation I'll talk about in just a moment, there's a way to even make that not just impromptu. But anyway, just keep in mind that impromptu is just that. If you're familiar with the word, it means spur of the moment, happening right now. You're just thinking and speaking off the top of your head. It can be an effective delivery technique, but you really have to know how to organize your thoughts before you say anything. All right, anyway, so impromptu speaking. Yes, that's on the test. What else? Oh, manuscript presentation. Manuscript, the word comes from hand. It's Latin. Manus is hand for Latin. Spanish, it's very similar in Spanish, and so on. And script, of course, is that's from Latin too, to write. So manuscript is to write by hand. And of course, at one time, that's exactly how everything was done before the printing press in 1460, before Gutenberg started cranking out his books off a printing press. Everything had to be done by hand, manuscript. And a manuscript presentation, a speech, a eulogy, whatever it might be, is one that has been written out completely. Now, obviously, if I were going to write something out word for word that I was then going to stand up and read word for word, I'd do it on the computer, wouldn't I? And then print it out. It's still a manuscript, all right, because it's word for word. And I'm sure you've all seen speeches that have been given in this manner, where the presenter stands there with paper in hand and reads it word for word. And sometimes, as I say down here, for formal occasions, political speeches, that sort of thing, it works just fine. But it tends to be very stiff. You don't get that sense of spontaneity, interaction with the crowd that you do, certainly with impromptu for sure, and other types of presentations. So, as I've said with the manuscript presentation, I always have students tell me that they have to write their speech out word for word before they can do anything else. I completely understand. I've done that myself at times where I write my speech out word for word, but I don't want you using that in your speeches, such as the self-introductory speech and so on, informative speech, persuasive speech when we get to it. You still need to work from an outline. Why? Because if you are, it must be 2:00 here in my office. All right. If you're reading from a paper, word for word, you can't engage the audience very well by looking at them. And I know I haven't had a chance to talk about the eye contact a lot. I did tell you, make sure you look at the camera when you're recording your speeches. If we were in the classroom, I would really emphasize the importance of eye contact. If you don't look at your audience, they're going to think you don't care about them. So eye contact is very important. And a manuscript presentation, one where the speech is read word for word, it's very hard to make eye contact. It's very hard to engage with the audience. All right, now memorized. Memorized, we're not doing that. I'm very excited. I just received this book, of course, through Amazon the other day, and it's called How to Win an Argument, an Ancient Guide to the Art of Persuasion. Oh, I have such exciting bedtime reading. And it's by that old Cicero, the guy who was the Roman senator 2,000 years ago. Oh, thank goodness, though. It's in English. It's been translated. I can still read Latin, but it's very slow. So one of the important aspects of what Cicero called the art of rhetoric, public speaking. Remember, rhetoric is public speaking, and the book called Rhetoric was written by Aristotle 500 years before Cicero lived, so it's been around a long time. But he talked about different methods, what a good speaker needed to be able to do. And one of them was to memorize. Now, the reason for that is that, of course, that there were no teleprompters. You couldn't easily print out your speech, obviously. And so these people memorized. I've done some reading on ancient and medieval memory techniques. And it's just incredible how these individuals could recite very long poems, stories, speeches from memory. You may have had an English class where you read some of the Odyssey or the Iliad by Homer, and the bards, the storytellers that went around from city to city in ancient times, could recite 3,000 lines of poetry from memory. Okay, but I'm not asking you to do that. So uh, the memorization, I'm going to get carried away with this. Yeah, you can see here. Uh, Obviously, if you're memorizing it, you can look at your audience all the time. That's what actors do. They memorize their lines so that they can interact with other actors and their audience. Uh, you need a lot of practice to do this. And a lot of times, memorized speeches just don't sound right. They don't sound natural because the person giving it is having a hard time remembering it. I don't know. I have heard some memorized presentations that are very good, but still, it's a heck of a lot of work. Reciting poetry, uh, ceremonial speeches, all that sort of stuff. Remember, strange things are done in the midnight sun by the men who mold for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. Yes, I've memorized that poem. Okay, all right. Anyway, so so we've had what impromptu, manuscript, memorized, and here it is. This is the one that is absolutely the most important of all the presentation styles, the one that I want you to work on in developing extemporaneous. I just like saying the word extemporaneous. Extemporaneous, and this picture here that you're looking at, maybe you recognize him. That's Jerry Seinfeld, and he comes to Vegas quite often, gives these fabulous stage presentations. And when he comes out onto the stage to uh, to give his show, it's like he's just coming out and chatting with the audience. Yeah, it's a one man show. He's up there, he's talking, but there was a lot of preparation that went into this show to make it sound like he didn't have any presentation or preparation. Does that make any sense? It's so natural the way it's presented that it seems like uh, he's just having a chat with the audience. But in fact, he outlined everything he wanted to do in the order in which he wanted to do it, the punchlines that he was after. Now, of course, once you're on stage and you're giving a show like that or giving an extemporaneous speech, you have a lot more freedom than you do with a manuscript speech where you're just reading it, or even a memorized speech. And of course, it's much more organized than an impromptu speech. Is this making any sense? Let's see what else I have here. All right, so I actually have a definition. Speaking extemporaneously combines careful preparation of an outline and the structure of a manuscript. Ooh, okay. In other words, you really figured out what you want to say and when you want to say it, and then made sure it was coherent and makes sense. All right. Uh, what's my second bullet point here? You should be able to speak spontaneously and with enthusiasm that sounds unrehearsed. That's what extemporaneous speaking is. I'm doing extemporaneous speaking right now. I have my notes, the PowerPoint slides in front of me, but am I just reading them? That would be manuscript, wouldn't it? Did I memorize them? Well, I seem to know where I am in the lecture, so I guess in a way, after practicing it and doing this lecture any number of times, I know where I am in my presentation. But at the same time, I hope I'm exhibiting some enthusiasm, and there's a sense of unrehearsed in that, especially if we were in the classroom, we could have some fun with it. So, extemporaneous is what I want you to try to achieve in your speeches. Uh, don't just read from an outline, don't read from a manuscript. So, those were the four important ones. These are the ones that will be on the test: impromptu, off the top of your head, spontaneous; manuscript, it's been written out completely and it's read word for word; and then memorized. Okay, something I know you're not going to do, but somebody memorized the speech or memorized a poem, whatever it might be, is an important delivery style. And then for us, the most important is the one you're looking at right now, extemporaneous. Remember that long word, extemporaneous. Why do you outline this? I mean, how is this going to help you speak extemporaneously? Well, by creating an outline, first of all, you know exactly what it is you want to say and when you want to say it. That's the whole organizational aspect of it. As I say here, it provides keywords, key phrases, statistics, quotes, whatever it may be. So, yeah, I mean, there are times where you look down at your outline and read it word for word. I did a little bit of that in my self introductory speech. You'll see me do it in the other speeches as well. But if you have too much text on that page, it's no longer extemporaneous because you're beginning to read as if it were a manuscript, and it also takes away your ability to make eye contact. So extemporaneous certainly still uses the outline, absolutely. Some people write the outline onto note cards. I've told you I gave that up because sometimes I had too many note cards and it was hard to just handle them. We tend to write way too much on a little note card, and then you stand there trying to read it. I like having just a basic outline in front of me that I can use to keep me on track so I can speak extemporaneously. Yeah, it takes a lot of work to do this, doesn't it? This is a picture of Mark Twain. If I let my hair grow out and the mustache go, would I? Nah, maybe not. Anyway, yeah, it takes a lot of work. Mark Twain traveled the world giving one-man shows. He made a fortune doing this. He was the greatest humorist, American humorist of the 19th century. And of course, we remember him for Mark Twain and many, many other uh, books that he wrote and so on. But in his day, he was known as a public speaker. All right, and let's see what he said. He's talking about extemporaneous speaking. And he says, it usually takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. Now, he's kind of interchanging here. He's using the word impromptu because he's saying, when I give the speech, I want people to think I'm just walking out on stage and talking to them. It's his quote, so I'm not going to change it. But if I were to change it slightly, I would rewrite it this way. It usually takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good extemporaneous speech. It takes a lot of work. All right. And a good speech requires the preparation of an outline, gathering all your materials, whatever is required, and then practice. Practice, 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 practice. Now you can't. Can I move me? Oh, look at there. Woo! Oh, I'm getting dizzy. All right. This picture is of a man who just passed away recently, Hal Holbrook, who did a famous, for 30 years, he did a famous stage presentation of Mark Twain doing Mark Twain. And he was really good. I met him once at a performance, and he was just spectacular. But the way you make yourself sound convincing, sound excited and spontaneous is through practice. Practice, practice, practice. Practice the speech out loud. Time yourself. When you stumble, make a note on your outline that you need to make sure this spot is okay and so on. It takes practice. Don't just create an outline, turn on your camera, and give a speech. That's like writing a term paper and never reading it and editing it. You just write it and you turn it in. And I know you've never done that, have you? Of course not. So, as Mark Twain said, it takes time and preparation to sound natural. So, make sure that you try to achieve this sense of extemporaneous speaking. All right, so there we go. Again, on the midterm test, you will see questions about impromptu, manuscript, memorization, and extemporaneous speaking. This is all in chapter 12, but here it is in the proverbial nutshell. I hope this was helpful to you. All right, so if you need to go back and review chapter 12, make sure you look at those key words and terms in the back of the chapter. Those are really helpful. Thanks for listening. At least I didn't go on forever and ever this time, and we'll see you in the next video.